established a PhD in pole dance, is that correct? Gökçe Asena is not just a PhD student at this program, but she is also one of the coordinators, or the coordinator of the PhD program, right? At Ege University. So, Gökçe will be our first presenter. She has a long background in various specialties. She has taught at Kafkas University, and yes, and you are also a researcher at Ege University, correct?
Yes.
Gökçe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Should I be presenting from here or should I go there?
It depends on our technical assistant. Which place will be better for?
Is it okay if I present from here? Either way is fine for me. No problem.
Alright, so we're going to have first two presenters, each will get 20 minutes, and then we'll get 15 minutes for discussion after both presentation. For the next presenters, please be prepared to put your PowerPoint on a stick and please check it beforehand so we'll move smoothly from one session to the next one.
First of all, I want to greet my respected, loving teachers who are among the audience. Later, I would like to thank our study group Music and Dance in Southeastern Europe, ICTM Turkey, and our chair, Daniela Ivanova-Nyberg. Thank you very much for your efforts for the organization and presentations. I should briefly mention my field of work. I have been working as a research assistant at Ege University in Izmir for nearly 4 years. The department I work in is Turkish folk dances. I submitted my master's thesis and have started my doctoral studies to get my PhD. What I want to report today is an issue that draws my attention frequently in the organizational charts in my field. How did it come to my mind that there might be gender inequality when folk dance institutions in Turkey were being organized? I got such an idea through this congress held in 2018. I learned from my colleagues that important figures contributed a lot to the field of folk dances in Turkey, starting from 70s 1970s would participate in this. As a new member of the field, I had made up my mind to never miss the opportunity to attend and listen to the conferences, so I did. It caught my attention that not a single person was a woman in the 41 member presenters, which included 7 chairpersons, 1 free chair, who was also the main figure of organizing Congress, and 33 different speakers. What you see here is the full program. Even in the committee prepared for publication of the final declaration, there were no women. When I asked why to the organizers at the end of the organization, I couldn't get a satisfactory answer. I also requested to be a rapporteur for the Ankara leg of the Congress later. They said yes. You can see us a couple months later during visitation of Atatürk's mausoleum. This time there were women, including myself, wearing the costumes and creating an atmosphere. After I started researching, knowing that the most respected members of the Congress attendees came from the institutions and organizations of 70s, I decided to start examining the organizations of those years to find an answer. I met with Gürol Terim, who directed the Youth in Social Development project designed for rural youth to become civil servants in cities for 2 years between 78 and 80. As a 3-people team in the Ministry of Youth and Sports, his branch organized dance competitions for local dancers within Youth Week celebrations and youth festivals among local dancers from Turkey. During our conversations describing the scope of the project, he presented a photograph taken with Rahşan Ecevit in Down. Picking tomatoes as a part of the project, she was the wife of then Prime Minister Bülent Ecevit. At that time, I understood that what the dimensions of my research would cover and its relevance to agriculture and politics in Turkey. The most important point that Terim drew my attention was that the institutions responsible for folk dances were constantly changing hands in Turkey. Mergers and separations between institutions and organizations, especially the Ministries of Youth and Sports and National Education, made it difficult to follow the facts about folk dance organizations. With each change, information, documents, and staff changed, moved, disappeared, and it became even more difficult than the last time to follow a trail of the situation. External model in Inequality suggested a network of influence as such. Socioeconomic, cultural, and environmental facts, community facts, and gender were intertwined. For this reason, I prefer to identify the concepts that constitute the main themes affecting gender inequality towards women in folk dance organizations, among others. I decided to deal with these concepts within the frameworks you can see on the right column. Here, I have listed the main points regarding the activities during early Republican era. I prioritized when women got the right to vote and be elected to several governmental cadres. The following slides will allow us to make a comparison between this situation and the general situation of Turkish women. You see on the side are from 2 institutions that have contributed to the development of early Republican people, the Halk Evleri, People's Houses, and Köy Enstitüleri, village institutes. Women appeared in the documents of sports bayrams, meaning sports festivities. The students involved were usually the students of several high schools in big cities such as Ankara, Istanbul, and Izmir. However, People's House and Village Institute students consisted of peasants, which make up the majority of Turkey. Institutions were designed for integrating with agriculture and self-sufficiency, as well as the importance of collective work. Despite their declaration that they practice folk dances, why haven't we come across more documents of dancing or exercising women in those institutes? Here on the right, you can see a petition. Excuse me, I put it in the wrong slide. You can see a petition by Kastamonu Educational Directorate on 1943 saying all single girls are welcomed, written for the headquarters. Here you can see on the right two peasant students of the Kızılçublu Institute are featured on the cover of 1938 Education magazine published in Izmir. On the left, exactly 12 years after the photo on the right, male students exhibit physical abilities and female students watch them with other males in the celebration of the establishment. We come across with photos of students of opposite sex not touching each other while moving in fever in number. As a matter of fact, it was quite common at that time to see people positioned deliberately against traditional values, such as what happened to Şerif Aykut. Working on many years of compiling in Kırklareli folk dances, his team of local dancers succeeded and he was exiled from the city in 1950, being accused to display dances such as Çiftetelli and Karşılama in its natural context and without avoiding allusions. They were accused of being obscene by the local intellectuals and he was sent away. Byford states that the two dances remained banned until 1992 within the physical education curriculum of the Ministry of National Education. Please allow me to rewind in history a little bit at this point. Going back to the second constitutional period, as in Fatma Gül Berktay's sayings, Young Turk period that showed a lot of interest in women's rights and made contribution to Turkish feminism. Although Young Turks opened many women's magazines in the period, they also censored those magazines. The period's thought mechanisms were mainly in three subcategories. Those were Islamism, Westernism, and Turkism. All of them offered reforms regarding women socially, culturally. Islamists tried to protect women. Westerners were also divided into those who rejected the religion and those who declared themselves as Muslims and opposed extremism. Turkists, based on the concept of nation for religion, Ziya Gökalp became the pioneer of Turkism by putting the concept of culture at the base of the ideology. Pan-Turkist organizations such as Türk Ocakları were founded. Şahin Aydın states these institutions had forms of folk dance organizations and they were closed before opening of Halk Evleri, people's houses, in 1932. Let's try to see what was changing in a woman's life when the situation was like this at that time. A good example could be the writer Halide Edip. In her novel, women threw their shadows over the walls of their houses and with the men, they became the active element of the nation. Some extremists strongly objected to the handling of such issues by women. Even in a crumbling empire, fiction expressions caused Halide Edip to receive death threats. Now, let's recall the data on women on their right to vote and be elected. In a comparative study, spouses were asked about voting practices. According to the answers, 85% of the husbands stated that they told their wives who to vote for. The same question was asked to the wife, and the result was verified. And this study was conducted in 1971. So 40 years after the data written here. Now it's time to tell what was done in folk dance organizations between 50s to 70s. That's why we are going back to the city again. Yapı ve Kredi Bank is the first privately owned bank in Turkey. On the occasion of 10th establishment anniversary, it organized folk dance festivals. First of them were a competition for the festivals ahead, jointly with the Journalists Association of Turkey, 10 folk dance festivities, and in addition, 4 regional festivities were held between 1950 and 64. According to what we learned from Arzu Öztürkmen, in the competitions of folk dance festivities, female dancers of the winning teams were awarded a gold medal, whereas male dancers a silver medal. In this way, they tried to encourage female participants for the next 9 festivals. Under the leadership of Yapı ve Kredi Bank, Turkish folk dance's survival dissemination facility was established on 1955 during the organization of these festivities. The facility was closed on 1978. It was decided to transfer the obtained data to the Turkish Music Conservatory. During these days, while the cultural recognition of the dances increased, the presentations began to not match with their local qualities. For example, according to Akademik, the dance seen in the photo on the right is not performed by women in local environments. However, the organizers remained to be men, and dancers were chosen to be including women in many regions. In 1967, the folk dance contests were organized by the Ministry of Tourism and Promotion. Following this competition, Milliyet newspapers started to organize folk dance competitions between high schools. We can see the photo of the jury table of the competitions held in 1967. Some attendants of our Congress in 2018 in there, sitting on the table of juries on 1976, such as we see here Uzman Sağlık, the organizer, and İsmail Öztürkmen. Sharing the scene from the 70s, a milestone should be mentioned. Large agricultural loans and abolished taxes relieved rich landowners who could afford new machines. They became richer. Small farmers began to migrate to the cities to find work. Governmental policies caused rapid reduce in the agricultural population during 50s and 60s. According to Nükhet Sirman, more than 95% of working women were in the agricultural sector in 1955 in Turkey, and by 85, so in 30 years, the rate hadn't fallen any more than 10%. In years when agricultural activity reduces labor employment, the indicated feminization of agriculture in her saying became low wages, so women's wages were also lower than men's, and the fields women usually worked remained within borders of traditional roles. Data from 1965 shows females work mainly in carpet weaving, textile, nutrition, and clothing industries with the ratio of 85.53%. Wages were the lowest of all expertise, and women were almost always below men in hierarchy over any workplace, including the offices. People's Houses reopened in 1963. Organized folk dances started again, and the cancelled dance ensembles were gathered under one roof again. However, since most of the dancers no longer experienced the context of the dance in daily life because of migrations, it was inevitable that they start to create another context. Especially with the shanty life, the situation between rural and urban would create an ambiguity, such as staying a peasant or becoming urban. When you think about the table in the beginning again, we see that we have come to the date we started, the period when folk dances were administered by state institutions. Now we know about what happened before it got to this point. Thus, I will be able to provide compact information examples that summarize the situation. Euroterim was communicating with hundreds of teams through constant communication with the Ministry of National Education and also the local educators from dance teams starting from the end of 70s, and stated that he didn't ever communicate with any women among them. These years, men continued to organize and teach women how to dance. So what happened in the end of 80s when the facility known as OBESIT, the Department of In-School Physical Education and Scouting, was opened. It was learned that there were connections with nearly 200 associations within the facility. When I examined the full list of these associations, I saw that the rate of women among their officials couldn't exceed over 10. So 10 in 200. Also, the female members in final juries of OBESIT, the rate was 2 in 27. Also, according to the information by the lists I observed, that as the scope and the scale of the competition grew, the rate of male judges increased up to 3 times. It seems difficult for women to rise in this business. One association in accordance with it was TUFAG, founded in 1984 in the city of Yalova. Board of directors of on the left at the time, in 1980s, and since it is still active today, I checked out the managers from the website, all the managers from then until now on the right. Notice only one woman in association's history of management. In the 2000s, Folk Dance Federation was established in a highly controversial manner. It defined its primary duty as organizing national and international competitions in accordance with the rules and procedures. Since the lists are not shared on the official site, I made a phone interview with the vice chair of the central referee. According to her, not many things have changed since the federation took it over from OBESIT and then Youth and Sports Directorate.
Please move the conclusion.
Of course. While the number of Turkish folk dances departments or major art branches providing education in the field of traditional dances in Turkey is 8, in the study by Sonay Ödemiş and İlke Kızmaz, the table here reveals that the number of lecturers who have completed their undergraduate education in 2016 met only 5% of the need. According to the information I received from the conservatories of Gaziantep and Van, although the number of lecturers is increasing now from 2016, the female teachers is still considerably less than of men. Comparing with the data, I don't know if you can see, collected between 1927 and 77, revealed that the situation didn't change much. This is the female lecturers in conservatories from 1927 to 77. Ödemiş and Kızmaz gave the following information in their article. As of 1996, the Ministry of National Education opened a folk dance teacher position for conservatory graduates, but few graduates in metropolitan cities abandoned the financial appeal of the free market of folk dances. They didn't prefer Anatolian cities. Same situation has emerged as an important aspect of my research as well. For my conclusions, institutionalization and professionalization in the identification, dissemination, and teaching of folk dances began in the early Republican period. Various conservative and idealistic policies and tendencies before this period affected the existence of women in society as well as in folk dance organizations. Although there is no basic attitude or a set of concrete goals to exclude and subordinate women, a problem related to the position of women draws attention throughout the history of Turkish folk dance organizations. In order to reflect the traditional views correctly, it is not possible to communicate with the public and work in the field only by determining the dances or communicating with the teams about the competitions. A more holistic method of work is needed. Even though the same rights for women and men at all levels are provided before the law in Turkey, it cannot be said that these rights have reached all women even after a long time has passed since they were recognized. Examples show that the Turkish folk dance organization scheme, while being organized by the state, practices seem perfect on paper. However, the transformations that the country has gone through may have exhausted the woman beyond all negativity. While coping with the weight of social and religious traditions, and she may not be able to pursue her aspirations such as being a manager in a folk dance organization, managing a team, or being a senior educator. My suggestions: experts or decision makers should set aside their point of view and prejudices and be trained. Female staff should be reached in sufficient numbers in technical planning areas. Changes shouldn't be made from an evolutionist point of view, so folk dance should be including folk somehow. A bridge should be built between the countryside and the city of the level of awareness and knowledge. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Doctor. We will leave the questions after that, after Biljana's presentation. And now I'll invite Biljana